Sharron Ward, Washington isn't yet pointing the finger at any particular group for this attack. It's said this is a complex attack. But Libya's Deputy Ambassador in London, Ahmed Jibril, has already named Ansar al Sharia as the perpetrators of this attack. What do you believe is the basis for the attack?
Well, I mean, it's been reported that the Ansar al Sharia brigade were there primarily because, of people insulting, being up against the film that was insulting the Prophet Muhammad. But I don't believe that was the prime reason why the brigades or any of the Salafist brigades were there. It sounds to me much more like this was a pre-planned attack in response to Al-Qaeda's number 2 being killed, because his actual death was confirmed just on Tuesday by Al-Qaeda. So this seems to tie in quite nicely with the timing of it all. I think there's certainly some reason to believe that people were there originally to protest about the Prophet Muhammad, but it appears that this attack almost started from the beginning. I mean, as people have been saying, protesters don't just arrive with RPGs and start firing at the embassy.
So that sounds far more worrying than some spontaneous demonstration, that this is an opportunistic, if you like, well-armed attack. And it has been, you're suggesting it is to do with the killing of the Libyan extremist, Abu Yahya al-Libi, a very great distance away in the borderlands of Pakistan. Is it really linked to that, do you believe?
I think a lot of commentators have certainly been looking into that, and that does seem feasible. We've heard the sort of preliminary reports. There was actually a Libyan commander who was involved in the rescue operation, and he was speaking to the Reuters correspondent, who said very clearly it was a two-pronged attack, for starters. I mean, not only was the embassy attacked, but their safe house, which they thought nobody knew was the location of, was attacked in a secondary attack. So, I mean, if you're just protesting about the Prophet Muhammad and his film, you're going to get very angry and you're going to be outside the actual embassy. But these people obviously knew their movements and had already known where their safe house was. So they were then able they came under a secondary attack. So there are certain elements that would seem to certainly suggest this was part of a pre-planned attack. Again, because of the firepower, and also I believe one of the commanders who was involved from the Libyan Shield said that the rounds that they were firing were extremely accurate as well. I mean, there seemed to be some military experience.
All right, so if we're talking about this group, Ansar al Sharia, most of our listeners will not have heard of this group at all. I know you've written about their activity, in increasingly militant activity in attacking shrines, but what do we know of the group and its intentions in terms of attacking a target like this?
Well, that particular brigade is very shadowy, and I wouldn't want to pin all the shrine attacks necessarily on this one brigade. I mean, there are a number of different Salafist brigades operating throughout Libya, particularly in the east. I mean, the February the 17 brigade, that is a well-known Salafist brigade. For example, and even Sukajuma brigade in Tripoli itself, that has a lot of Salafist elements. So the actual Ansar al Sharia brigade, there's not a lot known about them. They did come out and say that they had some sort of strange little press conference yesterday where they did try to say that they were there to protest about the Prophet Muhammad, and that all Libyans should come out and protest. But there are elements of that brigade who were certainly involved in the shrine attacks. But there's also been a lot of complicity within the SSC, which is the Supreme Security Committee. I mean, some of those committees are made up of brigades who are Salafists.
Yes, well, clearly if it's disturbing that this is a well-organised attack with political intent on one side, I suppose it's just as disturbing that there appears to be an enormous vacuum on the other side, that is, of any state security arm stopping the attack. So what has happened there to have such a breakdown?
Well, I mean, the Ministry of Interior itself and the Ministry of Justice have Salafists within their ranks. So, they can do whatever they like. And this is why they've been able to get away with the shrines. The ministry, it's been quite well documented by a number of eyewitnesses. For example, when the Al Sharia mosque was blatantly destroyed in broad daylight in the middle of downtown Tripoli, when, the SSC forces, even the Deputy Prime Minister, Mustafa Abdul went out to actually ordered the SSC forces to go and protect the shrines. But instead of protecting the shrines, the forces went and helped them demolish the shrines. They blocked off the streets and started hassling, intimidating anyone who was trying to take photos or pictures or report about what was happening, and actually helped them destroy the mosque.
Can I ask, in terms of what this says about the overall nature of the Libyan government, many observers would have said Libya, out of all of the countries coming out of the Arab Spring, had chosen a more secular path, a less Islamist government. But what are the indications now of what we've seen, particularly with Mr. Shagur's promotion?
I'm quite worried about his promotion to becoming Prime Minister, because look at his track record when he was Deputy Prime Minister. He was completely unable to control his own security forces. They actually went directly against his own orders, the Ministry of Interior in particular. Now, if Abu Shagur is able to sack and completely bring in a whole new cabinet, then, there's some hope. There is some hope there, but he's got to rein in these militias. He's got to bring all of these separate, ad hoc ragtag militias that have all been made up of revolutionary brigades who aren't very disciplined, who all answer to their own commanders and not the government structure. If he needs to either dismantle the whole SSC and the Libya Shield, and bring them all under control of the actual national army and the police force. And this is what ordinary Libyans have been demanding for months now to happen, because they're outraged. Ordinary Libyans on the street are outraged at the shrine destruction, and they're utterly distraught at what has happened to Chris Stevens, the US ambassador, and the other US diplomats. I mean, Chris Stevens was considered a great friend of the Libyan people, and he knew a number of them personally. Everyone is in utter shock and despair that it's happened.
So do you think that this presages possibly a descent into even greater chaos in Libya if these Salafist groups can't be reined in?
Well, I mean, look at what's happened. I mean, we were arguing quite a few weeks ago, when the shrines were being destroyed, Libyans and other observers were saying, listen, if you don't rein in these militias now, who knows what can happen? And we were looking at this 2 weeks ago when the Al Sharia mosque was destroyed, and we were all saying, where is this going to end? And then what has happened? The US ambassador has been killed. I mean, I don't know how much more worse that can be. So, if the government, the newly elected government, doesn't take serious control and make this their number one priority to rein in these militias and bring them under the control of the government, then, then Libya has got serious problems.
Now, Washington has promised, of course, it will bring the attackers to justice. Let's say the United States is now drawn further into Libya, pursuing extremists, possibly in the way it has in Yemen or even in Pakistan. What are the ramifications politically of that, of the United States now having to pursue the people that did this?
Well, of course that's worrying, because that brings into all sorts of, issues of US boots on the ground and, intervening in a sovereign state. And, obviously that's not going to go down well. But I also do think that if the Libyan government is struggling in controlling its own forces, then it clearly needs help from the outside, or at least from the UN. It does need some help from external forces, even if it is just support and advice. And, these people do need to be brought to justice. I mean, the people who were attacking the shrines, the Salafists who were going around attacking the shrines, and this isn't new. This has been going on for at least October, November last year, if not even straight after the revolution, after the Gaddafi fell. I mean, I know for a fact that from as early as November, Salafists in Tripoli in particular were going around trying to destroy mosques and shrines. And I was even at a press conference where Abu Shugur, who was then Deputy Prime Minister, tried to dismiss this as purely a silly little religious incident between Sufis and Salafists, actually Wahhabists, who are the Saudi Arabian, strain of Salafists. And he tried to completely dismiss it as not a phenomenon and something that the Sufis and the Salafists would have to work out amongst themselves. Now, failing to control that and taking charge and seeing that as a serious issue from day one has led to the spiralling out of control now.
Now, presumably the Salafists don't want just small target attacks, even though this is a horrendous crime in itself, but small attacks like those against the shrines. What are they seeking more broadly? At one stage, there were claims to set up an independent state in East Libya.
Well, I think, any sort of jihadist or, any sort of Islamic extremist in that sense are obviously aiming for their own caliphate. They're aiming for their own Islamic state. They want to basically, run the show. But particularly within other less, for example, not jihadists, but more sort of the Salafist end or the more Islamist end, they are wanting to take control in other forms. For example, controlling the woman. I already know of reports, for example, on Monday night in Tripoli, where Salafists were going around in police cars, in security cars. So there was some complicity there with security forces, going around cafes and restaurants to check to see if there was any woman daring to be out late at night. There's a worrying trend here that's starting to happen. And also hassling women, there's been certain reports of people being hassled now about wearing the hijab. Why aren't you covering your hair? I mean, the Libyan people are moderate Islam. They're moderate Muslims in general. They reject this kind of ultra-conservative Islamism. So this is very worrying if the Salafists are, trying to take control. And the Muslim Brotherhood, people will say that the Salafists and Muslim Brotherhood despise each other, but I think there's a lot of working hand in hand here. The Muslim Brotherhood, lost at the polls. They're now trying to get their influence any way they can. If they have to take it by brute force, they will.